Hey guys, Squatch Reloading here. We're going to keep on moving on in our XL750 changeover as part of our 10mm series. Today we're going to focus on establishing our case bell or our cartridge bell or pre-flare, whatever you want to call it. We're also going to work on getting our powder measure set and ready for a charge. We're going to get this guide rod set and adjusted. So we'll be all ready to start checking powder and seating the bullet. So we're going to need a set of calipers, and I'll show you why. A good rule of thumb on setting up a cartridge bell. And we're also going to need to borrow a couple of these Accurate Outdoors 180 grain bullets. And then we have the 5 cartridges that we have already sized in our previous video. But before we get into it, I need to give a quick shout out to one of my first subscribers, the Lone Wolf 38, aka Jack Woods. He's been with us from the beginning, and I wanted to give him a quick shout out for all of his likes and comments. So thanks, Jack. So let's get started setting up this powder measure. All right, so we have our powder measure die already threaded in a little bit. We have our lock nut loose. And I'm also going to take my 5/32 Allen key here and make sure that I loosen up, but don't completely remove the hold down clamp here on our powder measure. That way I can spin. And the reason I want to do that is so I can make adjustments. It's a little tricky. There's not a lot of room in here. But we want to be able to make adjustments to the die, and I'll show you here, without the powder measure spinning. So now that we got that loose, we can go ahead and start setting up our case bell. Alright, so we're going to work with one case at a time. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and throw one of the cases, the cartridges, down into the case feeder, and we're going to go ahead and cycle the cartridge into station 2, and that's where we're going to do our pre-flare. So I'm just going to short stroke it to get it to the station we want. So now what we want to do is make sure that we don't have this die set too low, because we want to make sure that we're going to manually start bringing the flaring tool in the powder drop section of this die down to the cartridge. So we're going to raise up into it, and now we're going to start tightening up the powder measure, and this is why we left the actual powder measure itself loose, so we could begin to thread this down into the cartridge. And it does take a little bit, so I'm not going to bore you with that. Once we get it down to where it's touching or going into the cartridge, we'll come back to it. So I have some engagement into the flare portion of the powder drop die. So we're going to start seeing some bell or some pre-flare start to develop on the cartridge. So I'm leaving the press as is, and I'm just going to short stroke it now so I can get a feel by my fingers, and I can feel a slight bell. So what I'm going to do here is I went ahead and I took out one of our brass pins here. I'm going to index this out because I want to measure it, and I want to show you a quick way to get into the ballpark. This is going to get you close. You may have to do a little bit more or less, but I'm going to show you a quick trick on how to make sure we're getting at least enough bell on our cartridge. Alright, one way we can measure if we're getting in the ballpark of enough flare, and what I found is about 12 thousandths will be right there, pretty close to where we need to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my calipers and I'm going to zero them out on the cartridge, OD. And now I'm going to check and see how much bell I have. And right there you can see we're at 4 thousandths. So I'm going to keep making adjustments until I get that to roughly 12 thousandths. So we're at 4 thousandths total bell or pre-flare right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop it back in my case feeder, and I'm going to grab the cartridge, make sure that I fully insert it, but I'm not going to engage the sizing die again because that's going to defeat the purpose. So I'm just going to let it index around back to our flare operation, and I'm going to make about a half turn, maybe a little more, and then we're going to re-engage it, and then we're going to check it again. And keep in mind I still have my caliper zeroed from before, so Right now, we're roughly there at 11 thousandths and a 5. Yeah, so it's pretty close to 12 thousandths. So now what we can do is see how the bullet sits in our cartridge with 12 thousandths. Alright, so I've indexed the cartridge back around. We have 12 thousandths of bell on there. So let's just see how this fits into the cartridge. Looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and run these other 4 straight through, because we still need to get our die buttoned down, and we'll just check it just like this. Alright, I'm going to drop a fresh case in. I'm going to make sure it engages from our case feeder. And again, these have already been sized, so I'm going to short stroke it. And the one on the back side there, it's going to fall out. But we're going to go ahead and get back into our flaring station or our powder measure. We're going to bring it up in. And I'm just going to feel it just to make sure. And then I'm going to go ahead and button down the die with my wrench here. And I always want to button my dies up when they're under load. That way I get, good thread engagement. The threads are centered up, and it's being presented to the cartridge as it would be during our loading process. So now that that's buttoned up, we're going to go ahead and run this around and check it again. Okay, we're just going to short stroke and index this over, and now we're going to check one of our projectiles or bullets, and perfect. So 12 thousandths is going to work on this particular bullet that we have. Now we need to reinstall our guide rod and spring assembly. Remember, this goes in from left to right, so it's going to go in left to right. We're going to let it hang, and then we're going to bring the shell plate back up. And the reason I do that is so I can get the guide rod aligned into the bracket that it goes into. Just snap in the collet, and then we're going to bring it down. So what I always do first is I want to get this lined up so it's somewhat parallel up and down. And once I get that done, then we're going to go ahead and tighten up these 5/32 Allen bolts. So what I always do is I put some tension on it, and then I'm going to go ahead and tighten these screws up. And they don't have to be ridiculously tight, just hand tight. And I always say for reference, torquing on the small end of the Allen wrench is all you ever need. So we'll set that aside. And now that we have everything snugged up where it can't move, we're going to make an adjustment here on this spring tension, and this is critical. So I'll show you guys how to set that up. Okay, so to set our spring tension, which is right here, the tension is set when the handle is forward or that you're seating a primer. So we want to make sure that we keep that push forward, and then we're just going to keep tightening it up until it's about a business card's width. And I'm not going to grab a business card, I can eyeball it, but for you guys that can't eyeball a business card, you might want to get one. But I'm just going to snug it up until it's about a business card's width, and that looks pretty good. And then that's set. Alright guys, that's going to finish up this video, but just a recap of what we accomplished today. We have our powder measure mounted, it's buttoned up, we have our guide rod all dialed in, we have the tension set, which is really important, and we have a case bell or case pre-flare established. Now we used 12 thousandths over the nominal OD today to get our bullet to set right there on top of the cartridge. So keep in mind that 12 thousandths is going to get you in the ballpark. You may have to increase that diameter a little bit if you're experiencing any buckling of the cases during seating of the bullet. Or, we're using range brass, so there's going to be some variation in case wall thickness and things like that. So as we run, we may have to adjust that a little bit. So just keep in mind 12 thousandths will get you in the ballpark, and it's worked out for me for quite a while. Kind of where we're at in this process. Right now we have our case feeder, the conversion all complete. We're dropping cartridges as expected. We have our our resizing and decapping die all set. We've confirmed dimensionally that everything looks good there. And so what's coming up next is we need to get our seating depth established, which we're going to take from our load development from our Redding T7 and the testing that we've done. We got to get our crimp set, and then we got to get our powder measure dialed in for the charge weight we're looking for. So that's what's coming up next. We may go ahead and put that powder cop in on this, since we're going to run 500 or so. So we'll go through that if I decide to do so. I'm still kind of mixed 50-50 if I like that or not. I still find myself looking at every cartridge as it's coming through, and I think that's just because I've ran so long on the 550s that's just something that wasn't available on the 550, so I've trained myself to do so. But again, guys, check me out over on Facebook and Instagram at Squatch Reloading. Again, all these videos are on Utah Gun Exchange, Gunstreamer, and of course the Reloaders Network. So I guess that's wrapping this one up. So until next time, guys, God bless.